Good morning, everyone. I'm in Brooklyn in an Uber on the way to the Ohel to pray at the resting place of the Lubavitcher Rabbi. I came to Brooklyn yesterday because my nephew got engaged, and there was a l'chaim. A l'chaim is an engagement party. The way it works in our community is that when a young man is ready to get married, he reaches out, the family, parents reach out to a matchmaker, and different suggestions are proposed, and he goes out on dates with girls until he finds the one that he feels is his soulmate. And they usually date for about, it could be anywhere between 3 weeks to a month and a half, sometimes 2 months, and then they get engaged. But before they get engaged, when the Rebbe was alive, they would ask the Rebbe for a blessing for their engagement. Today, the bride and the groom go to the resting place of the Rebbe, and they pray and asking the Rebbe to beseech on high that their marriage should be blessed. And then they announce their engagement, and that night the whole family and friends come together and wish the bride and the groom mazel tov. So I flew in for my nephew's l'chaim, Yossi Simpson. It was a beautiful simcha. I got to see my parents and the whole family and all my friends in the community. And as I'm making my way back to Palm Beach, of course I'm going to stop at the Rebbe's grave in Queens to pray, not just for my family, but for our whole community, and I'll have everyone in mind for blessings. But I was thinking about how a marriage is really, in a way, the subject of this week's Torah portion. Because you see, last week was the revelation at Mount Sinai, which the Torah rabbis compared to a bride and a groom. God selected us from the nations, took us out of Egypt, brought us to Mount Sinai, gave us this Torah, which is like the marriage contract, and said, "You will be my eternal people. Am HaNetzach." And sure enough, until today, we're still wed to God in this relationship. And the Torah is what guides our marriage, our relationship with God, our covenant, our sacred bond with God. And right after last week's Torah portion, which was the great marriage ceremony between God and the Jewish people, we come to Mishpatim, and we look at this week's Torah portion. There's 53 mitzvot, which is a big section of the 613 mitzvot, which delineates so many different specific laws of being a Jew, whether it's interpersonal relationships, of laws of kashrut, and many other commandments. And the question is, we were just at this great revelation, this great Mount Sinai, this great wedding canopy ceremony celebration, and now we're getting into all these details. It could seem like a little bit of a letdown. And the truth is, when you think about marriage, people say, well, how do you get married? A matchmaker introduces you. Don't you have to fall in love? And the truth is that in our tradition, we don't really believe you have to fall in love before you get married. The term falling in love could also be falling in lust. And you could fall for somebody, as they say. But you want to make sure you're making the decision based on mutual values and vision and goals for life and quality of character that you see in the other person. And so it's not so important about falling in love. Most important thing is to find someone who you're compatible with, who you share a life dream with, and who has good character traits and the proper level of knowledge of Torah and intelligence and interests in life. And then you build a life through the day-to-day giving and sharing and caring for one another. And that's why after Yitro, the great revelation at Mount Sinai, you come to Mishpatim. It's about the details. It's about the way you act in the relationship. So you could have this big romantic dating process and this big wedding, and then you go on a great honeymoon. But it's what happens when the husband and wife come home and live together, how they treat each other. And amazingly, in this week's Torah portion, it says, "Va'anshe kodesh tihyu." You should be people of holiness. And our rabbis say, what does it mean, people of holiness? To be a mensch, to be a good person. That's going to determine how successful the marriage is. Not the big celebration of like at Mount Sinai there was thunder and lightning. It's not the big sound effects and the big noise that is surrounding the wedding and the liveliness of the band, but it's the day-to-day love and interaction between the bride and the groom. And that's why after Yitro we come to Mishpatim, the details of how to live together with God, and so too in a marriage, how we treat and respect and honor and cherish and are sensitive to the needs and the care of one another. There was a rabbi in Jerusalem who once, one of his students said to him, I have a question. So the student said, the rabbi said, walk me home, we'll talk on the way home. When they got to the house, they kept on having the conversation for another 10, 15 minutes. When he finished, the rabbi said good night to the student. And the student sees the rabbi is fixing his tie, brushing off his jacket from any, cleaning his jacket, fixing his hat, preparing himself to go into his house. So he said to him, do you have some kind of a guest waiting for you? I'm sorry I kept you waiting, the way you're tidying yourself up. And the rabbi looked and says, no, there's no one in my house. He says, so why you, no one's meeting me. So he says, so why are you, making sure your appearance is perfect? He says, well, my wife is waiting for me. And this was a rabbi who's been married over 50 years. That's what determines the relationship, the marriage. And that's why after Yitro, the highs of Mount Sinai and the great, awesome experience of the giving of the Torah, we come to the nitty-gritty, detailed laws of how to observe and celebrate and sanctify the marriage each and every day. Have a wonderful day.